And good evening and welcome to City Focus. I'm Marty Olsen, your host, and tonight I'm delighted to have on the program a young fellow who I met him a good number of years ago, and he was active and working diligently on behalf of Paul Formica in one of his Senate runs. I don't remember precisely which one or how many years ago. But Irving Steele, welcome to the program.
Hey, great to be here with you, Marty. Good to see you again after all these years.
It's been a while, but you had reached out to me about joining you on a program that you do on this station, and we just haven't been able to connect. And so I said, well, geez, I've got an opening. How'd you like to come on my program? And you jumped at the opportunity, so welcome.
Hey, thank you. It's funny how timing kind of works out one way or another.
So I anticipate that we'll be discussing politics and elections, and I'm looking forward to an engaging conversation. So
definitely. And I think I always have the first memories of you as when I was relatively new in the New London area, and you were just so warm and welcoming. You were trying to help connect me, introduce me to different people. I was just, as you said, working to help elect Senator Formica for the first time in 2014. And after that, you were so kind and helpful in New London, helping to connect me with the Kiwanis Club, introduce me to different friends, and I'm just so grateful for all the warmth and friendliness that you provided to me.
Well, thank you. I mean, you appeared to me at the time you were a young up-and-comer, and I think things, you at the time were seeing a lovely young lady who was from China, if I recall, and I'm not sure, but you seem to be pinballing or in that area there, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, exactly. I've been very fortunate. I've been back and forth, total of probably about 10 years, spending about 10 years overseas, and predominantly most of that time was in China, and so I was lucky enough to meet many different people there, including the person you're talking about, and learn the language, learn some of the culture. But I feel like with many things, the more you know about something, the more you realize you don't know something. And the Chinese language and the Chinese culture is definitely something that the more you learn, the more you realize that there's a lot more that you need to learn.
China goes back thousands of years. The United States, we're happy about 260 or 70 years or thereabouts, and China is like 5,000 years. So they tend to take the long view.
The long view for sure, and it's something that they're very proud of too. That they'll often remind you and let you know that they have a 5,000, as you said, 5,000-year history, dating back to some of the earliest philosophers of Confucius and Lao Tzu's son, and these different people who have a huge impact on what their culture is today. They say they all kind of come from this culture, and so they all are connected to that one way or another. So very different from us from 1776 in America. We're a young country.
Americans tend to look at things and they expect results immediately. What can you do for me now?
Yeah.
And the Chinese don't quite operate like that.
Yeah. But the interesting thing, Marty, actually is I was just there again for the first time since COVID this summer, and it was phenomenal how much things have changed and adapted there. To me, it felt like going and seeing almost a completely new country. And this was a country when I first arrived in Shanghai, there were 3 subway lines. And in 5 years, it went from 3 subway lines to 13 subway lines in that amount of time.
And how many people live in Shanghai? It's a big city.
So it's a city of about 20 million people. So it's enormous metropolitan area. People from...
I mean, we think New York's big at about 8 million, and that's more than double.
Exactly. Yeah, so it's a huge place. You're exactly right. It's a country roughly the same geographical size as America, and just in terms of land. However, the population is about 4 times larger than America. So they have about 1.4 billion people.
That's with a B.
With a B, yeah. So if we think that places like New York City and Los Angeles, if there's a lot of people, a lot of traffic there, go to China. There's a lot of people, a lot of traffic, a lot of cars. But the interesting thing is that the government there has invested so much in infrastructure. And so over the last 10 years, they've developed subway systems all across most of the major cities. They've developed high-speed train systems so you can go all around the country with really nice, clean, fast trains. So yeah, there's a lot of people, but they've made it so the infrastructure is there to help alleviate some of that stress that we might have in some of our major cities.
Yeah. Well, they also, they had a one-child policy, which I think they've relaxed recently.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't recall precisely how many years that was in effect, but I think it had to a degree, had a negative impact on the country.
It was phenomenal. You're exactly right. That not only just the fact that most families had one child, but then this one child had grandparents on both sides, had aunts and uncles on both sides. So there was just so much focus on this one child and so much pressure. And just recently, over the last few years, they've started to loosen up this policy where if both of the children are one child families, then they can have two children of their own.
Yeah, I mean, but they also culturally have looked more favorably upon the male.
I think traditionally that's kind of been the case. That
that's a bit of a conundrum too. I mean, you want to.
Yep.
So if a family conceives a young girl, that's not necessarily was looked at as a positive during his tenure.
Yep. Yeah. So it's been a big challenge in that regard for sure.
Well, one thing I wanted to ask you before we get kicked off into this current events, what drew you to Paul Formica to work on his campaign? And you were very, very active in that. I mean, I don't remember if you were the campaign manager, but you certainly were. It appeared to me into the day-to-day operations of that campaign. And I'll let you explain.
Yes, thanks, Marty, for the question. And it was an interesting time for me that after that initial 5-year stint where I was stationed overseas, I was coming back to America, coming back to Connecticut where I grew up. I went to public schools here in the region, and I was always passionate about politics, and I was passionate about civic engagement and just the amazing fact that we all kind of have a voice in our society through the ability to vote. And so coming back to our region, I was trying to find different ways and different opportunities where there might be something of a unique opportunity for me to get involved and to serve my country that has given me so much. And luck had it that I was able to connect with Senator Formica, who was then First Selectman Paul Formica, and we were getting together over a lunch and chatting with just the idea of maybe he should run for the 20th District State Senate seat in Connecticut, which is the area here along the shore. And I said, this is an amazing idea. I said, this is perfect. I said, this would be a great opportunity. I viewed it very much as kind of a short-term startup. I was coming from some of these kind of technology startup environments, building companies and raising funds, things like that. And so I viewed it very much as a startup opportunity where instead of us going out and trying to garner dollars and get more customers, our actual goal was to go out there and, as you know much better than me, go out there and get votes.
Yeah.
And so at that lunch together with Paul, we said that it would, with Senator Formica, we said that, yeah, let's go for it. And I was very grateful that he entrusted me with the management of the campaign to kick it off, to lead it. At the time, he was the First Selectman. and he ran unsuccessfully for Congress before that.
2 years prior.
2 years
He
prior.
went into that late, and I think that he did the state GOP a favor by filling that void, because he certainly hadn't given himself the time and opportunity to achieve success, although I thought he was a quality candidate at the time.
Exactly. So as you know, it takes a lot of time and energy to run campaigns. And oftentimes, not all the time, as we're seeing potentially with Kamala here, is oftentimes the earlier you get into a campaign, oftentimes the more advantages you have. You can plan, you can get your team out, you can work your strategy, all those things. And so for 2014, when Senator Formica was going for state senate, we entered at an opportune time. It was still early in the campaign season. He had a nice track record of working in public service. He had a nice track record as a successful small business leader and as a father of 4 great people as well. And so I said, sure, let's do this. This sounds like a great opportunity. And you're right, I was so excited. I dedicated all my time and energy to that campaign. As a volunteer, I wasn't getting paid for this at all. And so I worked diligently assembling the team. We were able to have an amazing marketing manager who helped with all the messaging, crafting the posts, the messaging, our signs, all those different things. We had one of the first key team members was a treasurer who is now a leader at the nuclear power plant here, who leads that facility. And we were able to kind of build out our team. We had a policy expert, and we were really cognizant of the fact that we didn't want this enormous team. We also had someone who was an amazing person working with our volunteers and helping really with that early fundraising. That, as you know, there's the Citizens Election Program in the state of Connecticut, where if you raise a certain amount of funds, I think at that time it was maybe $5,000 or $10,000 that we had to raise, and then the state of Connecticut would match and put in extra money that we could use towards the campaign. And so it turned out we had this core team, and then from that core nucleus of our team, we found different great people in each of these different towns and cities as part of the district, New London being one of them.
Yep.
And we kind of had these captains, of which I think you were one of them for New London, who were instrumental in helping us to garner, I think, the most votes a Republican has garnered in that race in New London in a very long time. They kind of helped us to get above that threshold needed to help get Senator Formica eventually elected in 2014. But the great thing about the whole race was the whole time we felt we were the underdog. We felt like, sure, maybe we had somewhat of a shot, but the only way that we'd ever win is, 1, if we worked harder, and 2, if we worked smarter. And together,
I don't recall who Paul ran against that cycle. I'm not sure. Was it Betsy Ritter that he?
exactly, from Waterford.
Yeah, she was a state representative.
She was a state representative for years and years, and she felt like, our understanding was, she felt like she was more of a shoo-in, that she kind of deserved this spot. I think it was Senator Andrea Stillman, who was
Also from Waterford.
Also from Waterford, who was retiring at the time. And so she felt like it was kind of her opportunity. Oftentimes when people retire, you know, better than I do, that's kind of when you jump in there, and that's when you find the opportunity to take that spot. And so it was an open seat. It was a very competitive seat. There was a lot of attention from Hartford. There's a lot of attention from other places around the state. We were also endorsed by, as you might remember, we were also endorsed by the Independent Party. And so that really helped us to eventually win the election. But great memories there. That was kind of how our friendship initially started and blossomed during that time, that I was so appreciative. I was scrambling the 8 different towns of the district, trying to have someone in this town and this city help out. And whenever there was something that we needed in New London, you were Johnny on the spot, or Marty on the spot. You were there, and didn't even have to ask you twice that you were there to help. And you've been involved in many different campaigns, many more than I have, but having people that you can really rely on and depend on and trust like that is truly invaluable. So again, very grateful for all that you did to help us on that campaign, and eventually to help Senator
I've known
Formica.
Paul for pushing 40 years. I mean, I joined the Kiwanis Club 37 years ago, and shortly after joining Kiwanis, Paul was instrumental in building a Kiwanis Club in East Lyme, which is where I actually had an opportunity to meet him. So it's in that 35-year range. And he's always been a quality guy as far as I'm concerned, and did a hell of a job up in Hartford on behalf of the constituents of the 20th District. Now, did you stick with that and with him moving forward, or did you opt to get involved with other stuff?
Yes, that's a great question. That after we, on that, what was it, November 4th, we never forget that day when we started tallying up some of the results and saw that we won the race, that Senator Formica won the race, that we were all elated. And he headed up to Hartford, and then from there I went and I focused on some other projects that I was focused on at that time.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting. I mean, since I've been involved in politics in Southeastern Connecticut, that 20th District seat has been primarily a Democratic seat. Pete Kinnear broke through for a term. He rode on Ronald Reagan's coattails in 1984 and served a term and was not reelected. And then Larry Betancourt was elected and served. I forget how many terms he served, but he was in conjunction with Lowell Weicker, who was a very good friend of his, I might add. And when Weicker brought the income tax up front, and it was a very, very tight vote, he squeezed his pal Betancourt for the tie-breaking vote, which Betancourt gave him, which brought us the income tax. And, unfortunately for Larry, that was the end of his political career. I mean, he was ushered out, and it was not pleasant. It was actually it was kind of scary to a degree. But God, Kinnear, Weicker, Betancourt, God, they're all gone now. It's amazing. But you know, looking back, I mean, if you had an opportunity to work for Paul Formica now on a campaign, would you do it now, or was one enough for you?
Well, to your point, exactly on the district, that it's a very, very tough district for somebody to win, especially if you're running under the Republican Party. I forget what the numbers are currently on the district, but at that time, I think it was something like a third Republican, maybe about 40% to 45% Democrat-leaning registered voters, but the grand majority, about 50%, roughly, or unaffiliated voters. And so for anyone to do well in that district, and I think this is kind of a microcosm of the state of Connecticut as a whole, as well as our country as a whole, is that someone who can be middle of the ground, somebody who can speak and relate and communicate with people from all different backgrounds, all different ideologies, and show them kindness, respect, and have integrity with that, I think is someone who can really do well and succeed on these campaigns. And I know over the last few years, a lot of our communities have kind of gone away from that. You might disagree with me on this, but I feel like hopefully one thing that we'll see coming up here in 6 days when the elections, I know we'll be talking about the elections here in a minute, but hopefully when we'll see with the elections coming up here in a week, is that we kind of come back to that as America, that something that we've been founded on since 1776, something that I feel so proud of in our country, is that people can have differing viewpoints and can come from different backgrounds. But the moment that you, Marty, maybe you stand on one side of this political spectrum, and maybe I stand on a different side of the political spectrum, the moment that we can't sit at a table and have a conversation, the moment we can't show each other respect, I feel like that just takes so much away from the power and strength of dignity of our country. And so I really hope that we can kind of come back to this essence of, it's great that we have these tables where we can have these conversations. We can have differing viewpoints, but at the end of the day, we have a rule of law that we can follow, that we know and we can trust. We have courts, we have these rules, and I think that's what's really important for our country. So I really hope that we can see that. How are you feeling in that realm?
Well, I think that ideally that would be, it's a good goal and objective. I know at the local level in New London, which is a heavily Democratic community, I mean, when I started many moons ago, the registration was roughly 5-2 in favor of the Democrats, and it's now pushing 7-1.
Yeah.
Which makes it even more challenging for the minority party to have representation and have a diversity of thought and ideas.
It's hard, and right before we came on the air, we were just saying that I think you were maybe the last elected Republican in the city of New London. Correct me.
At the council, yeah. I think Rob Pira may have done a term on the school board.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, I think he got elected in 2019. That was the year I ran for mayor unsuccessfully against Passero.
Mm-hmm.
But Adam Spracacci had run for council that year unsuccessfully, and Piro ran for school board and did one term, and then he opted not to run anymore. Mm-hmm. And we haven't had anybody since.
And I know that's
unhealthy for the community.
Yeah, it's unhealthy. I mean, it's a challenge that in some of the gerrymandering that goes on in different districts. Of course, New London is a whole city, so we're not talking about New London. But some of these different districts, whether it's State House or U.S. House, the way that they kind of carve up these districts just to ensure that it remains in that one party in perpetuity.
Well, but New London has that in that at the state representative level.
Yeah.
The 39th district, which encompasses the 1st and 2nd district in New London, which is basically from the north end, Coast Guard, Conn College, at the Quaker Hill line, mm-hmm. Into, I'm going to say roughly Thames Street, Plant Street, is the 39th district. And that has been in Democratic control at least since the mid-1980s, going back to Bill Sebas, Wade Heislip, Ernie Hewitt, Chris Soto, and now we have Anthony Nolan. And not one Republican has come close.
What is the result of the last couple elections? Is it something like 90%?
I don't recall off the top of my head, but it's overwhelming.
Overwhelming.
And we have a candidate, a terrific candidate this year, beloved Grace Carter, who's running against Nolan. Right. And she's working very diligently to pull the upset. Mm-hmm. I'm praying for her, but the odds are long.
Just as you said, if the numbers are something like 5-1 registered voters of Republicans, Democrats to Republicans.
And in that district, it's even worse.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're going up against those odds, of course, you can have maybe one of the most amazing candidates and work very diligently, but it's very, very challenging.
So,
just based on numbers.
and then in the south end of the city, down by Ocean Beach, there's a sliver of New London that is now aligned with Groton, and we have our rep is Christine Connolly, who's a Democrat.
A lawyer.
And I don't know her. I've never met her. I've never seen her. She could walk in here right now. I wouldn't know her. I don't think that speaks well that and I'm involved. So I don't know how much time she spends in New London, but she hasn't reached out in this direction. And the candidate the GOP has got running against her this year is also from Groton. I've met her once. And she's, and I don't think I'd recognize her.
Okay.
So I don't necessarily think that speaks well to the representative government in terms of, the south end of New London. Are we getting their best? That's just one man's observation.
Yeah. Well, how are you involved in the city of New London these days, Marty?
Well, I'm on the Republican Town Committee. I'm involved with the Kiwanis Club. I've got my program. And I'm not an elected official. I'm not serving on any current board and agencies. But
you're living there.
I certainly live there, and I still think I'm a pretty well recognized figure in the community.
Yeah.
You don't have to be on the city council to be known and recognized and respected.
Well, I wonder from your perspective, how much over the last few years, you say that you haven't had enough of interaction with some of these elected officials or candidates. How much has changed over the last few years, maybe due to COVID, is that people aren't going out to restaurants as often, or people aren't having events as often as they used to. What are you seeing in that realm?
I think it depends on the candidates. COVID certainly has thrown a curveball. I mean, I know that talking with some of the restaurants in town that I don't know if they have fully recovered with their dine-in business, but their takeout businesses have taken off. So they're still able to keep their head above water. So they're doing what they have to do to keep the doors open and make a living. But it's changed. I mean, things certainly have changed.
Yeah, it's a different environment now with changing. COVID has changed pretty much everything in our society, and I wonder that, yeah, you're involved with a few different organizations and different things, but maybe it's an opportunity to try to have maybe monthly events or try and have different gatherings and get people together a little bit more, talking about some of these ideas, that instead of so divisive of, hey, you're on this party or you're on that party, maybe we come up. One of my recent guests was Lee Howard from The Day.
Yep.
And he was having these terrific community events he was talking about, where he would bring people together on a set of a few different issues pertaining to the community, and they would come up with solutions on the spot to try and resolve some of these things. And it didn't matter if they were young, old, if they're Republican, Democrat, Independent, anything in between. And I felt like those kind of strategies are maybe some that we can learn from.
Well, I know Lee, and he's a good man. I know his objectives and goals are admirable. So and I would wish him success with what he's attempting to achieve. But it's a tough nut to crack. I mean, I recall vividly the first election when Nolan was running, and that was to fill a vacancy. Chris Soto had been reelected, but he had then received a job with the state, and he resigned and created a vacancy, and Kat Goulart ran against him. And during the course of a debate, Nolan was asked, there's concerns that you are not representative of the entire district, that you're only concerned with Democrats. What about those other folks? What are you going to do for them? And his answer was very clear: nothing. I was aghast with that response.
Yeah.
And so that was disappointing, especially from a gentleman who had spent a career working in the police department in the community. But if you weren't a Democrat, he wasn't really interested in what you thought, had to say, or what you brought to the table.
Yeah, and I think it's important, no matter who gets elected, that you need to listen to your constituents. It's kind of rule number one, I think, of being an elected official.
It served me well. You know, I know that as an elected official, I've always tried to be a problem solver. And with that, you have to listen to people and how to come up with middle ground that's going to get a consensus. If you're going to go for the whole loaf of bread, oftentimes you will find yourself being disappointed.
How did you first get involved in campaigns, in elections?
I literally had a couple of backyard issues that got my attention, and the response of local government was less than satisfactory at that time. This is in the mid-1980s. I'm not sure if you were born yet. And ironically, at that time, I literally received in the mail from the GOP locally a piece of paper like this. And open it up, we need help. And I was upset, so I responded. And that's what it took. And I was interviewed by some of the local party leaders at the time, and I never expected to be on a ticket right away, but I indicated that, you know, maybe at some future time, like now.
Right away.
You know, maybe I'd like to run for city council. And that was 1984. And rolling into 85, lo and behold, I'm on the ticket running for city council.
Wow, a year later.
And I had no idea what to do, how to run a campaign, what to do, and I was beholden to others to kind of help guide the ship. And all the incumbent councilors that year were running, which included 6 Democrats and Willie Nahas. And they all won. Now, I came in third that year amongst the Republicans with Nahas, another gentleman, and myself, which I think to a degree surprised many because they didn't think that I had much political cachet at that time. But I worked hard. Then we had a big hurricane, Hurricane Hugo. That put a clamp on my campaign because it was just so much work that had to be done. And I was in contracting at the time. That you do the best you can, but the things that I had been taught by the party leaders didn't get me over the finish line. And
they got you close, but not close enough.
Well, not even close. I mean, I was. But I says, if I want to be a city councilor, this plan didn't work. So what do I have to do to be successful? So I devised my own plan. And that.
What was that?
Well, I went to every city council meeting for 2 years. I went to all their committee meetings for 2 years, which was usually held on off weeks or before regular council meetings. I went to every Ocean Beach Park Board meeting for 2 years. I went to every Water and Water Pollution Control Authority meeting for 2 years.
So pretty much every single night of the week you were at the meetings.
I wrote a letter to the day paper every month. At that time, letters to the editor were kind of a big thing, as opposed to now you comment directly to articles as they appear. And you're only allowed to have one letter a month. So I would get a letter published every, and at these meetings I would attend, I would speak at these meetings and practice my public speaking. So that when you had opportunities to speak in other venues in different audiences, that you were able to articulate yourself and your arguments and your points and what you thought you could do to make the community better.
So you build up a track record of putting your face out there. That's
right. I mean, it was a mission, and in that particular cycle, which in 1987, I ended up not only winning but coming in number 2 in an at-large election to Willie Nahas, which I think, flabbergasted a lot of folks, but a lot of hard work, and then in the fall cycle of '87, an exhaustive amount of door-to-door campaigning. So it was a lot of work. But I
And
mean,
you're a big believer in door-to-door campaigning.
absolutely. I
It
think
helps you a lot.
it's critical. I mean,
Yep.
and in those early days, I mean, people, especially in different neighborhoods, really didn't know who I was. So therefore, banging on a door, if I banged on 10 doors, I mean, I'd be fortunate to get a couple of people who'd actually want to engage me in conversation. If I go door to door now, it's hard to go door to door because people want to engage me in conversation because I'm a known quantity.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a different ball game, but it's still important.
Mm-hmm. It's a way to introduce yourself. It's a way to meet random people. It's a way to find out and listen to a lot of the concerns of the community.
That's where you learn, you gotta listen.
You gotta listen.
And
So you
it's
became a
interesting.
very great listener over that time.
Well, but I think it's important. You have to be.
Mm-hmm.
And to a degree, I mean, it's fun. I mean, I enjoyed campaigning, but it's a lot of hard work. But it means, going to social engagements, going to, becoming involved in other things in the community besides politics.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I joined in '87. I also joined the Kiwanis Club, and I joined the Elks Lodge in New London, and supported other activities in the community. And I think that's important as well. You just can't show up, get nominated in July, and expect that you're going to win in November when people don't know who you are.
Because people at first, they knew who you were, they knew who you are, but then they also saw that you were so passionate about New London, so passionate about the community, right?
That certainly helped. I mean, I'm a local guy. I mean, my father grew up in New London, and his father had a business, and I ran that business for 20 years. So we had roots here. My father's brother, my uncle, was a local physician. So I mean,
What was the business you were running?
Tobias Olsen, general contractor.
Okay.
Home improvements, remodeling, and alterations. And
And you were running that for over 20 years.
I ran it for 20 years, yeah. That was from 1980 to about 2000, and I made some decisions in my life at that time. I wanted to make some career changes and did some different things, went back to school and things of that nature. And some things have worked out, others haven't, but it is what it is.
Mm-hmm. The only way you know is just keep moving forward, right?
Well, you do your best.
Do your best. Yeah.
You can't dwell on the past. But part of my point, and I try to drive this point home to local candidates in New London in particular, but others as well who have to campaign in New London, whether it's for state rep or state senate, Congress, you've got to put some time in here. That's one thing that Paul did was terrific at. I mean, he polled every election well in New London. I'm not sure he ever won New London, but he polled strongly. He didn't allow New London to be his anchor, or he would lose. And that included twice against Martha Marks, who lived in New London.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, but he was in New London for events and different opportunities when people were going on, or there was groundbreaking and things of this nature. He always made an appearance. He was there and visible and accessible, which I think is important as well.
Definitely. And especially in a place like New London where there's just so much going on with the Gard Arts Theater, the Chamber of Commerce, I think now is located in New London.
They just moved in across the street from the old Citizens Bank building.
What else is there? The Coast Guard Museum is going to be opening up here in the next year or two. The Innovation Center from the Chamber of Commerce. There's just so much going on. The wind turbines at the State Pier. There's a lot of things going on in New London that to be active in the community.
Yeah. Well, Paul was very supportive when he was in the assembly with the wind issues and developing alternative energy sources.
Mm-hmm.
At a personal level, I think that this may be a bit of a boondoggle. The state expenses have just catapulted out of control.
For the state pier.
Yes, that's been an unmitigated financial disaster. Eversource has backed out. I mean, they're gone. And that, I think, sends a clear signal that there's some issues there. And even Orsted is tap dancing a bit.
What would you say are some of the key local issues in New London right now?
What are the key what?
Local issues in New London right now.
New London has got a bevy of concerns. I mean, housing is an issue, affordable housing. I mean, Mayor Passero has been gambling heavily on with apartments and high-end apartments. I think the key word here is gentrification, which is a dirty word in Democratic politics, but he's leading with his chin on this, but he's doing it cutely. And all these new buildings that are going up, high-end apartments that are geared more for the professionals and engineers at Electric Boat.
What are some of the prices of these apartments? One bedroom is maybe what, $1,500 to $1,900 a month?
That's correct.
Yeah,
I mean, that's well above the what the local fare can afford. So, I mean, I don't know if the goal is to push these folks out or just push them down, but it's, I'm concerned. And I'm concerned that with the things being rentals, that folks are not putting down roots. It's too easy for them to just revolving door and spit out if
yeah, well, it's tough if you're spending almost $2,000 a month on your rent.
to save.
Yeah, exactly. So where are these high-paying jobs?
Well, those are the, like I say, I think they're gearing them up primarily with EB, with the engineers. And I know I work at Ace Hardware across the street here in Waterford, and we get a lot of young folks that are just out of college, and they're engineers working at the boat. So whether they're coming from Rensselaer or Wentworth or Yukon or other places hither and yon.
And they're working over at Electric Boat.
And right outside where we're sitting right now, there's new apartments going up here in Waterford. They're all high end, and they're not geared for low income or modest income.
Sounds like one of the key issues I'm hearing you talk about is affordable housing is of utmost concern right now.
Well, it is a big concern. I mean, in London, I think in the region as well. But these are things that our state reps also need to be involved with, and our state senators. And you know, public safety is an issue always in New London. I mean, we've had too much issues with violence and guns, and I know a lot of folks, especially in the warmer ones. I don't know how it is out in East Lyme, but New London, where you get these kids on dirt bikes that are terrorizing drivers on the roads and wheelies and engaging in and out of traffic, speeding, going up one-way streets the wrong way, and local officials would go, well, we can't do anything. It's a state issue. State's got to, well, my attitude is, well, that's an inappropriate, incorrect response. You know, what about our rights? We shouldn't have to be terrorized on the roads here.
And someone was telling me the other day, I'm not sure if it's true or not, that a lot of those fast food restaurants where Burger King is.
On Coleman Street. Yeah,
Coleman Street.
When the kids get out of school, they close the doors. You can go through the drive-through, but they're creating so much hate and discontent that they lock the doors.
That's true.
That's not a good look.
Yeah. And how about education? Would you say that education is also one of the top issues right now?
Education's always an issue.
Always.
I mean, London made the interviews turned around here. You see, Irving here is interviewing me here, and I'm not running for anything. But listen, about a dozen years ago, New London had a state takeover, and they had a special master, and the community made a decision at that time to have a complete district from K to 12 that was kind of a regional outlet, and
What do they call that? The magnet district?
that's the magnet district. You got the term. And it was the theory being behind it was that the state would pump in huge amounts of money and we would build new buildings, and that students from out of the district would come into New London, and we would have to meet certain thresholds, and we would receive a lot of dough for that per student, which would help fund education in London, which according to our master, special master, we were unable to do that on our own. In terms of test scores, this has not been working well. I mean, we're not really meeting what we're supposed to do. We're still dragging our knuckles with at the bottom of the state with Hartford and Bridgeport and New Haven. And that's not an environment that is going to encourage middle-class families to come into New London with school-age children. Matter of fact, that's one of the problems. We get young folks come in because you can get good value when you buy, but when the kids get to be school-age, you know, the big question is, what do we do? Do we stay? Do we go? We send them to private school, and a lot of them leave.
And that's tough on the city.
It is. And
wanna
all
have
these new
people-
apartments, I might add, none of them are being geared for families. They're geared for singles, young couples, older folks that are retired, empty nesters, I guess is the buzzword. And but folks that are not necessarily vested in the community. And that's not good. I don't think.
What do you think for potential solution for that situation?
Well, you need ownership, and like I say, the apartments are a quicker fix, and it gives the tenant too much freedom to, like I say, catapult out. They can become your neighbor in East Lyme, send their kids to East Lyme schools.
Yeah.
And they do. You know, East Lyme's got a reputation for having a good academic and educational system. And I think it's a major draw into that community. If I'm not mistaken, your mom's on the school board. I mean,
Exactly. The education, I feel like, is one of the big drivers of not only attracting people, like you said, but also helping them to stay, but then also as a way to really help to increase that property value. That if people see that there's value in the education, they're, I think, a little bit more willing to pay these property taxes that help to fund a majority of the educational funding that we have in these towns and cities. So I think you're exactly right. The education is of utmost concern.
Oh, it's huge. I mean, and if New London doesn't turn it around, I mean, we're kind of treading, we're on a treadmill, we're going nowhere.
And what you said too with, yeah, maybe there's an opportunity to have some of the students go to private schools, but if the private schools are $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a year, how many families can afford that?
Well, not many.
It's tough.
You know, and like I say, I mean, it's a very clear delineation in terms of what the public schools in New London are looking like. I mean, if you go into the junior high and the high school, I mean, the racial makeup is pushing, I'm going to say 80% minority, maybe more. In and of itself, that's not a bad thing. But if you've got a district that's not performing well, it creates a perception that this is a place that, you know, I don't care what your race is, but most families are not going to gamble with their children's education. And if you can afford to be in East Lyme or Stonington or Waterford or Old Lyme or wherever, you'll go there to educate your kids. You're not looking for the lowest common denominator, you're looking for the challenge. The kids are going to get the best opportunities, best teachers, best curriculum, and things that will get the kids most motivated and get them into the best schools at the next level.
That's what every parent wants for their children.
Every parent wants. That's not partisan. That's a fact.
Yeah. Marty, what would you think about more regional schools, let's say New London County schools, going away from
Well, that's
cities?
what this magnet program is supposed to be. Although I think it's a poor man's look at Sheff versus O'Neill, which was many, many, many years ago when O'Neill was the governor, and was sued by the Sheff family that their child was not getting an equal education in Hartford at the time. So they're dumping a lot of money into the urban environments, but it's not turning out adequate results, be it New London or other places for that matter. And that's unfortunate. You know, the U.S. is slipping badly in terms of educational performance at a global level.
Yeah, and we might not have too much time to talk about that tonight, but to your point exactly, that we are really slipping in an opportunity where we've always been known in America as having the best educational system in the world, and that's kind of been the bedrock of our country.
And we took a major league hit, and during, you mentioned COVID. I mean, COVID was awful, and systems and things that really did not work out for the benefit of our youth. I mean, and we're still hurting from that today, years later.
Well, you imagine that a lot of these kids, for maybe 2 or 3 years, they were sitting at home behind computers trying to have math class and science class. That I can understand why a lot of them are maybe a year or two behind socially, emotionally, but also with their test scores as well. It was a huge impact for these children, parents, and teachers as well.
Absolutely. Not a good environment. And how we crawl out of that is going to be a real daunting challenge for government leaders at all levels for years to come.
Definitely for years to come. It's not something
it's
like
not
you
snap
started.
Your fingers and it's going to go away.
There's no quick fix. Yep. It's going to continue to take new innovative ideas, new solutions, year after year, month after month, and not all these solutions will work. That I think it's going to take courageous leaders to come up with solutions and try new ideas that will hopefully help alleviate some of these concerns from our communities.
But dumping money into these things, just dump money into them, is not, generally speaking, a happy way to go, because as has been seen here in New London with the amount of money that's been pumped into these schools, the results are not changing. And I remember seeing on 60 Minutes years ago, they did a segment on, was I think East St. Louis, where they had built a brand new building at that time, and I don't recall the exact timeline, but it was had all the bells and whistles for the kids, and the educational results remained static. And I'm getting the red light here that's telling us that we've exhausted our time here, Irving.
Well, it went by fast, Marty.
Well, it always does. And I want to thank you for taking time to come on the program.
Pleasure is all mine.
And we covered a lot of territory. Not much about the election, but we talked about an awful lot of interesting stuff. So thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll have to do it again.
All righty. And folks, you've been watching City Focus. We'll be back next week, the day after the election, and we'll see what's going on. Good night.